Before I start to film, I like to make an outline of what it is I'm going to cover so that it keeps me on track, and so I avoid having to go back and refilm or add to something. Also, you're going to want to film more footage than you think you're going to need. It is wise to try and keep your tutorials as short as possible. People really have short attention spans. I find that if you can keep your tutorial under 10 minutes is ideal. Sometimes that's not possible. You could break it down into sections so that people can learn a little bit, take a break, come back, view the next tutorial. That might help as well. So I just have an outline. This is our outline for what we're doing today. You could also make a little storyboard, write it down, jot down notes, whatever works for you, but an outline works to kind of pre-plan what you're going to do. So let's get into the heart of doing some filming using an iPad and an iPhone. On the iPhone, when you open your camera, you have a little bit of limited ability to look at the focus and the exposure. So when you're doing your tutorial, you'll probably want to make sure that you lock your focus and lock your exposure. To do that, when you tap the screen, you'll notice this little yellow box pops up, and right next to the yellow box there's a sun. If you drag the sun down, you change your exposure down, or you can overexpose by pulling up. I don't tend to use the exposure feature. I will change exposure in post-production in my editing, but I do want to make sure that my focus stays where I want it. So I will tap, I'll let the camera focus, and then I will hold, and it brings up this yellow AEAF lock. That's your auto exposure, autofocus lock. That's super handy, especially if you're trying to do a drawing where the camera may get confused and try and focus on you and then focus on the paper, and it goes in and out of focus. There's also some things that you can do up here that are, filters and such. I wouldn't use those. Those are things you can do better in your post-production. All right, let's start doing some filming. Here's my iPhone set up on the little makeshift tripod. I'm going to go ahead and open up my camera so you can see the table underneath. I do have a little bit of a shadow being cast right here from one of my lights. I'm not going to adjust that right now, but just so you know, you might want to adjust your lighting so that you don't have shadows happening like that. So if I'm videoing, it changes the size of the screen a little bit. So here's my little sculpture. And then I want to make sure he's in focus, so I'm going to hold here. I make sure that's locked, and then I'm good to go, and to go ahead and start videoing. So if I was doing a demonstration on using loop tools, I would continue to just work on the piece like so. And then when I'm done, obviously just stop the video. So there you have a couple of options at this point. You can look at the video by tapping over here, and you guys probably all know how to do this in your phones, which brings up your screen with your photos. And I'm going to move this so I can move this down a little bit so you can see better. At this point, I have some options. I can use iMovie on my phone and edit this, or you can click the edit button here, which brings up some limited editing. You can add a few filters, adjust some of the color. You can actually trim a little bit within the program, the camera program in your phone. But it's easier for you to do this on a computer if you have it. If you don't, we'll go ahead and we're going to open up iMovie later, and I'll show you how to use it on the phone. But what I like to do is go ahead and send this, and I use the AirDrop feature. And then what will pop up here, right now my computer's not on, but my computer will pop up, I click on that, and then it airdrops and sends the file to my computer. So filming wise, if you need to get into your camera to change things, go to your settings, open up your camera settings. You can choose lots of different things right here. You can change how many frames per second you're filming at. Right now I have it at 4K, that's huge. You might want to bring it down to 1080p HD, which is fine. 4K is really big. But just know that you can, in your phone itself, you can change the settings and boost and make your video better. All right, so let's take a look at the iPad next. I have my iPad set up using a tripod instead of the top-down method. I'm going to open up the camera and go ahead and select video. So you'll notice I have my workspace pretty well lit up, not a lot of shadows going on, and because I'm filming more at a straight-on angle, you can see it a little easier for this. If you're doing a drawing, it's better to do the top-down, but if you're doing like a painting or a sculpture, kind of filming from the side might work easier for you. You do have the ability to zoom on iPads and on iPhones, and I'm sure that this is the same for a Samsung Galaxy or a Chromebook. Anything that has a touch screen with controls, you can zoom in with the camera. There are also settings in the iPad, just like I showed you on the iPhone. You go to your settings, you go to the camera, and then you select what you want. Like right now I have this at 30 frames per second at 4K. That's huge. Again, for doing a tutorial, I probably would not do it at quite that large of a size. But since I do a lot of filming and then I actually use the film in my art video work, then I like to have it as high of a resolution as I can. So I'm going to just record a little bit. So here I can be working, using my hands, more of a comfortable position, I think, for sculpting. And then I can do the demonstration, finish up, go ahead and stop. And I know I'm doing this really fast, but I want to make sure that we have time to go over the editing, because I think that's where most people want a little bit of guidance. Once you're finished, you can move out of this, move in over, and if you're using an Apple product, find iMovie. It's usually a little purple square with a white star, and open it up. And then you have some choices here. So I'm going to take you into this in just a second. Let's talk a little bit about remotes. If you noticed when I was filming, when I pushed over here, the camera, it wiggled. This is not sturdy enough to keep that from happening. So if you have a remote, and a lot of times if you buy one of those little tripods, they come with a remote that's supposed to be used with a phone or with an iPad or with an Android system. So those are really handy, and you can start and stop your videoing and you don't ever have to touch it. So if you're standing away from the camera, that works really great because you can start and stop and it saves on your editing. Okay, so our next thing is to look at some editing.